You've got trouble in paradise as Elon Musk is now broken from Republicans and criticized Trump's BBL. Marco Rubio just paused student visa appointments as the U.S. launches a sweeping new social media screening program into what y'all are posting. Israel just launched new strikes in Gaza, and Yemen killed a top Hamas leader and says Iran might be next. RFK Jr. just erased COVID shots from the recommended schedule for pregnant women, and you've got doctors clamoring to explain why it's dangerous, unscientific, and going to hurt poor people. Andrew and Tristan Tate just got hit with 21 criminal charges in the UK, including rape, human trafficking, and assault. We're talking about all that and much more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, starting with this. Prosecutors in the UK just confirmed that they have authorized 21 charges against Andrew and Tristan Tate, which was expected, but it marks the first time that the Crown Prosecution Service has confirmed or given details on criminal charges. Right, and according to BBC News, you have Andrew facing 10 charges stemming from 3 alleged victims, including actual bodily harm, rape, human trafficking, and controlling prostitution for gain. And that is you have Tristan facing 11 charges from 1 alleged victim, and again, that includes actual bodily harm, rape, and human trafficking. With also the Crown Prosecution Service releasing a statement to Sky News explaining these charging decisions followed receipt of a file of evidence from Bedfordshire Police. A European arrest warrant was issued in England in 2024, and as a result, the Romanian courts ordered the extradition to the UK of Andrew and Tristan Tate. However, the domestic criminal matters in Romania must be settled first. Right, and with that, in case you need a refresher, because it's been a minute, you've got the Tates facing many legal battles. I mean, in the US, they're facing 2 lawsuits, one alleging that Andrew assaulted his ex-girlfriend in California, and another from Florida accusing the brothers of coercing a woman into sex work. They're also under criminal investigation in Florida, and then in Romania, there are 2 cases. One where they're accused of trafficking minors, intercourse with a minor, and money laundering, and then a separate human trafficking case that is actually facing setbacks after being sent back to prosecutors. Right, and then that brings us back to the UK, where we not only have the charges we just discussed, but also there's a lawsuit that was filed against Andrew by 4 women over allegations that the Crown Prosecution Service decided to not prosecute back in 2019. And of course, all of this as the brothers have repeatedly denied any allegations of wrongdoing. And then more specifically with the news today, you had Andrew retweeting someone who called the charges fake and claiming that the UK was trying to make an example out of him and Tristan. You also had Andrew tweeting, so Romania failed, now England tries. The Matrix is angry. They do this to any man who fights against them. Never give up men, never give in, do not be scared, strength and honor. Though that is, we also saw other responses, like from the lawyer representing the alleged victim suing him in the UK, addressing the news saying, "We welcome the clarity from the Crown Prosecution Service that our authorities are working to ensure the Tates face justice here in the UK. They cannot be allowed to escape extradition." And then adding, "At the same time, we ask once more that CPS admit its mistake in failing to prosecute Tate when he lived in the UK and finally charge him for the rape and assault of the other 3 women, our clients who originally filed criminal complaints against him as long ago as 2014, but were failed by the system. They deserve justice too." But with all that said, as far as what is going to come from this, the long wait kind of just continues. But then, next up from that, Secretary of State Marco Rubio just took 2 major actions on foreign visas that will have massive implications, and we need to talk about it. Right, because yesterday, Rubio directed U.S. embassies and consulates to temporarily stop scheduling new appointments for foreign student visa applications while the State Department prepares to expand social media screening. With that move then being outlined in a State Department cable that was first reported by Politico and has since been obtained and verified by other outlets. And specifically there, the cable states, effective immediately, all consular sections must stop scheduling new appointments and remove all unclaimed appointments for student and exchange visas in order to prepare for the social media vetting expansion. Though, according to the New York Times, foreign citizens with existing interview appointments for student or exchange visas should, in theory, still be able to attend those. Then also, very notably here, it is unclear exactly what those new guidelines will entail. Because the cable, it only says that the State Department is, quote, conducting a review of existing operations and processes for screening and vetting student and exchange visas and plans to issue guidance on expanded social media vetting for all such applicants. But you also had Politico reporting that the document alludes to executive orders that are aimed at keeping out terrorists and battling anti-Semitism, which I will say also tracks given the fact that Rubio has repeatedly spoken about canceling student visas, revoking permanent residency status, and studying the social media history of foreign visitors. With that then largely in relation to what's happening with Israel and Gaza. And actually, when asked about the cable in a press briefing, you had State Department spokeswoman Tammy Bruce responding with this.
If you're discussing that, that's something that has not been discussed publicly. It would have to be leaked material if it exists. What I can remind everyone of, which we've discussed for months here, is that we use every tool in our tool chest to vet anyone coming in who wants to come into this country. Every sovereign country has a right to know who's trying to come in, why they want to come in, who they are, what they've been doing, and at least hopefully within that framework, determine what they will be doing while they're here. So that's nothing new.
Right, so you had that, but she also then refused to say what the current process is for vetting applicants' social media or how it might change. And then in a statement to the Times, the department just reiterated her remarks about using all available information. And while you had the agency noting that visa applicants have been asked to provide social media account information since 2019, it also didn't specify what could cause an applicant to be flagged for rejection under a new social media policy. And then, to that point, it's kind of just unclear how any changes would significantly alter recent policies that have already been implemented. Because, back in March, Rubio sent another cable to consular officers directing them to study the social media content of certain applicants for various visas, including exchange visas and student visas. And last month, you had the Department of Homeland Security announcing that it would start screening non-citizen social media accounts for anti-Semitic content as reasons to deny visa and green card applications, including those of foreign students. And with all that said, one possibility is that the new State Department policy is just meant to provide more explicit guidance to consular staff on what kind of social media content should raise red flags, especially because according to reports, State Department officials have been privately complaining for months that past guidance has just been too vague with Politico explaining. It's unclear, for example, whether posting photos of a Palestinian flag on an X account should force a student to undergo additional scrutiny. But then also, regardless of the exact details of how this policy will be implemented, you have many immigration, law, and First Amendment experts condemning the move, or with them arguing that this is just yet another attempt to crack down on free speech and censor pro-Palestine speech on campuses. Because as we've talked about many times before, the administration has launched a sweeping effort to revoke the legal status of thousands of international students in the U.S. who have expressed pro-Palestinian sentiment. But this latest step, it has experts saying it goes even further. With, for example, Stuart Anderson, the executive director of the National Foundation for American Policy, saying that this new move, it indicates that the administration is trying to prevent student visa applicants who disagree with their views from studying in America, period. Though it also makes sense why they'd focus on that, because it is much easier than trying to remove people who are already here. Because as people like Anderson have explained, this administration's attempts to deport existing foreign students, quote, makes what the State Department has been doing legally questionable for students inside the country. But then adding, by focusing more attention on people before they get to the U.S., they would cut off legal avenues that people would have once they're in the U.S. And depending on if it's part of the intent, as a result, Anderson and many other experts argue that this plan could discourage more foreign students from trying to come to the U.S. while also dramatically slowing down student visa processing. And that specifically is something that could have very, very serious economic consequences. Because what many people might not realize is that international students, they bring in billions of dollars to the U.S. economy. They bolster the country's STEM sectors, and they provide essential funding for both public and private universities. In fact, according to one recent analysis, more than 1 million international students attend colleges in the U.S. each year. And during the 2023-24 school year, they contributed nearly $44 billion to the U.S. economy by paying for tuition, housing, and other costs of living. Right? And part of the reason why they contribute so much to the economy is because universities rely on them to pay full tuition, which constitutes a very significant portion of annual revenues for many U.S. colleges. In fact, international students actually pay a tuition rate that is higher than normal out-of-state tuition at some public colleges. And that, of course, in addition to the American students who are attending those same schools paying lower in-state tuitions. And at both public and private schools, they often get financial aid from the colleges directly or through federal programs. So as a result, you have experts saying that foreign students can actually end up contributing more than 1.5 times as much as their American student counterparts in tuition. The international students essentially help subsidize lower costs for American students, which is why you have so many people arguing that having less international students, it could make it more expensive for American students to go to college. And so it's entirely possible and plausible that what we're going to see are massive consequences, not only for the universities, not only for American students, but also for the U.S. workforce, especially when it comes to tech. But then all of that, it brings us to the second piece of visa news that I want to hit on, and that is that today we saw Rubio announcing even more new visa restrictions on foreign nationals. So I will say these appear to be very different from the ones we just talked about. With Rubio writing in a post on X, for too long, Americans have been fined, harassed, and even charged by foreign authorities for exercising their free speech rights. Today, I am announcing a new visa restriction policy that will apply to foreign officials and persons who are complicit in censoring Americans. Free speech is essential to the American way of life, a birthright over which foreign governments have no authority. And in a press release outlining the move, you had Rubio explaining it further, saying, in some instances, foreign officials have taken flagrant censorship actions against U.S. tech companies and U.S. citizens and residents when they have no authority to do so, and adding, it is unacceptable for foreign officials to issue or threaten arrest warrants on U.S. citizens or U.S. residents for social media posts on American platforms while physically present on U.S. soil. With him then seemingly hitting at the crux of what this move will really do, stating, it is similarly unacceptable for foreign officials to demand that American tech platforms adopt global content moderation policies or engage in censorship activity that reaches beyond their authority and into the United States. And it's really that last part that appears to be the real meat and potatoes here, because Trump and many others in the Republican Party have long complained of anti-conservative censorship, especially on social media, both at home and abroad. Though that appearing to kind of fly in the face face of numerous studies that have actually shown very little evidence of that. Instead, what was often found is that content that was removed was actually just misinformation or hate speech. But also, very notably, as tech companies have started to unwind policies moderating that kind of content in the US, leaders in other parts of the world have responded by imposing new regulations, which is then something that's pissed off many conservatives, including Vice President J.D. Vance, who argued that foreign leaders are censoring American companies and suppressing dissenting views by labeling them as disinformation or hate speech. So there, you've had EU leaders hitting back by arguing that the rules are necessary to compel tech companies to remove content that they deem illegal, like hate speech and child sexual abuse material. Right, and while Rubio didn't name any specific countries or foreign leaders in his poster statement, this move, it comes as Vance and others in the Trump administration have been particularly vocal about their opposition to European moderation laws. Laws that they argue are hostile to free speech, and then beyond that, it also comes amid a high-profile battle between Elon Musk and a Brazilian Supreme Court judge who ordered him to take down accounts and posts on X that were accused of spreading misinformation. But then, going back to what Rubio announced, you have experts saying that it would be a major escalation to start restricting foreign nationals from visiting the US, including on official business, just because they're enforcing policies that comply with their own laws and rules. With, for example, one State Department official reportedly telling Politico, if there's an American Nazi posting stuff in France and France is like banning pro-Nazi stuff, is Rubio going to say that the owners of that French platform doing content moderation are barred from entry to the United States? Which is then also why you have some saying that it is hypocritical for the US to try to force other countries to regulate speech as they see fit in the name of preventing American censorship. And that, in addition to people arguing that this move is especially hypocritical given the fact that Rubio and others in the administration are cracking down on pro-Palestine speech so intensely. Right, and arguing that it's just absurd that he's revoking visas for people who engage in speech that the administration deems unacceptable, but then punishing foreigners who are doing the exact same thing in their countries. So then, on the other side, you have many conservatives applauding the move, arguing that it's actually an important step to combat censorship. And so while we wait to see how all of this plays out, I'd love to know your thoughts in those comments down below. And then I've got more news you need to know about in just a minute. But first, growing up, the advice was often trust your gut, and I've applied that a lot in my life. Right? Nowadays, the chatter isn't just about trusting your gut, but also what your gut health means for your immune system, your digestion, and even your mental health. And while the internet is stacked with companies making tall claims, one company stands out for scientific integrity and transparency, and that is today's sponsor, Seed. Right, specifically, Seed's DS-01 Daily Synbiotic, the only thing that saved my stomach from full-on digestive meltdown. What makes DS-01 different is it's a synbiotic, not just a probiotic. It combines prebiotics and probiotics to support a healthy gut and overall health. And yeah, they bring the receipts with actual peer-reviewed research. And I'm not alone, right? This stuff has a cult following for a reason. It actually does what it claims. And so if you're ready to cut through the noise and truly nurture your gut health, give DS-01 a shot. Seed is offering y'all 25% off your first month, and you'll receive this 30-day supply, refillable glass jar, and travel vial. And after that, they send sustainably packaged refills. So if you're ready to upgrade your gut health, scan the QR code or go to the link in the description and use code DeFranco25 for 25% off your first month plus free shipping. Seriously, your future digestive system will thank you. Not out loud, because that would be terrifying, but you get the idea. But then, getting back to the news, Elon Musk hasn't even left the White House yet, and he is already breaking from Trump and Republicans. Because you now have Musk criticizing the president's so-called big, beautiful bill, which is that budget that passed the House last week.
The bill is passed.
Though that's not really coming out of nowhere, right? I mean, it's caused a split somewhat within the GOP between those who think that tax cuts should be the priority and those who think that closing the deficit should be. Because the bill, it would do a lot of things that Republicans generally like. Things like cut taxes by trillions of dollars, increase defense and border spending, impose Medicaid work requirements, cut food stamps, and roll back clean energy. Right? And in doing all that, it would raise the deficit by nearly $4 trillion over a decade, according to the Congressional Budget Office, as well as raising the debt ceiling by $4 trillion just to fund the government through the next couple of years. But notably, when Trump was asked about it last week, he attacked GOP lawmaker Thomas Massie for voting against it, and he praised Speaker Mike Johnson for unifying the party and defended his bill against the deficit hawks.
I'm a bigger fiscal hawk. There's nobody like me as a fiscal hawk.
Massie said this adds more deficit than Biden did, and this bill kind of...
Because we have to fix the country.
But not everyone in his party is convinced. You have a handful of Senate Republicans criticizing the bill, including Rick Scott, for example.
I support President Trump's agenda, secure the border, build up the military, make the tax cuts permanent. And I think we've got to do all these things. But let's live in reality for a second. We've got to go through every line of the budget. That's what Doge is doing.
And then, actually, speaking of Doge, you had Elon Musk echoing that same point on CBS, with him arguing that the bill contradicts his team's mission.
I was disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing. I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it can be both.
my personal opinion.
But also, I think it's important to note that when it comes to shrinking the deficit, Musk has taken some flack himself for not living up to his promises either. Because he initially said that Doge would cut government spending by at least $2 trillion. Then he later revised that down to just $1 trillion. But as of April, Doge itself only claims to have cut over $160 billion. And even that number, I say put an asterisk on it, it is dubious. Because, for example, you have the BBC finding that many of the largest saving claims are either lacking in evidence, highly speculative, or vastly overstated. Though we should also mention there that when confronted about this during an interview in Qatar last week, Elon defended himself. Though he did seem on one hand to blame the government for Doge's lack of success, and on the other hand claiming that it has been actually successful given the constraints.
The ability of Doge to operate is a function of whether the government, and this includes the Congress, is willing to take our advice. We're not the dictators, we are the advisors. But thus far, for advisors, the Doge team, to their credit, has made incredible progress.
Right, and then he seemed to suggest that he would be pulling back not just from Doge, but from politics in general.
In terms of political spending, I'm going to do a lot less in the future.
And why is that?
I think I've done enough.
And with that, if he's trying to devote more attention to his various companies, he does appear to have a lot of work cut out for it. With Tesla, there's the fallout from his involvement in the White House, including protests, vandalism, boycotts, declining sales, a very turbulent stock price, and a tarnished brand. And then with SpaceX, he's hoping to launch the first fully reusable Starship rocket by the end of this year. But then with that, this morning, as it descended back to Earth during its 9th test flight, the rocket spun out of control and broke apart, apparently thanks to a leak in the fuel tank. And that also after it failed to deploy 8 dummy satellites when a side hatch jammed. So of course, with everything space, there's a lot of failure before you have successes. And the main thing is that obviously Musk and Trump have a lot on their plate this year. And as it connects to the news today is the question of, will one of the side dishes be, will this disagreement over the big, beautiful bill deepen into a real political conflict? Or is it something that's kind of just in passing? Or will someone bend? And or is there a Trump tweet in the future about Elon Musk coming to me on his knees, tears in his eyes? Though I will say, it does not appear like we are there yet. Because today, when Trump was asked about Elon's criticism, he responded by saying, we will be negotiating that bill, and I'm not happy about certain aspects of it, but I'm thrilled by other aspects of it. That's the way they go. It's very big. It's the big, beautiful bill. But for now, we'll have to see what happens with their relationship, what happens with this so-called big, beautiful bill. And don't worry, because, the only thing at stake is the future of America. And you know what? Just to keep things light for me, it's no more Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill. It's Trump's BBL, his big, beautiful legislation. But then, to shift gears from that, Israel's now launched a new round of strikes across Gaza and Yemen, killing dozens, including children. And that, it's coming as Israel claims it's killed the leader of Hamas, which actually could put a peace deal even further out of reach if that was ever really a goal. But where we're going to start is with this tense humanitarian situation in Gaza and aid distribution sites. Where since March, Israel has blocked off aid to Gaza, but then on Tuesday, it allowed the group Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to roll out new aid centers. And while there were multiple locations, the one in Tel Al Sutton near the southern city of Rafah, it was the site of absolute chaos for a while. Because as you might imagine, there was a massive crowd wanting to score anything, and they quickly got out of control. Where with footage showing the group breaking barriers and rushing the aid, and then nearby Israeli forces probably didn't help things when they fired what they called warning shots, which led to the crowd stampeding as it fled the area. Right, initially, it was also thought this was fire conducted by a plane or a helicopter, but the IDF denied that and said it was just ground troops. However, according to reports at the site itself, the staff and armed contractors had an actual plan to avoid bloodshed. With the group Gaza Humanitarian Foundation saying that as soon as it was clear that things were going to be a shit show, they fled. And then local Palestinian staff formed a cordon around the crowd to try and somewhat contain things, which worked because things eventually calmed down and no shots had to be fired. Right, and the good news here is that this does appear to be an isolated incident and the other sites had no real issues. And all of that is notably, this is not a small amount of aid either, and it's mostly in the form of long-lasting food items. You're looking at things like flour, pasta, rice, beans, and when taken together, they reportedly feed 5.5 people for 3.5 days, totaling 462,000 meals. A number that importantly is expected to rise as more and more aid centers are opened up. Right, and then in addition to that, you have the absolutely massive news that Israel allegedly killed Hamas leader Mohammed Sinwar, with him being the brother of Hamas's former leader before taking over the position following his death in southern Gaza. And in a speech to lawmakers, you had Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu bragging that, quote, "We changed the face of the Middle East. We pushed the terrorists from our territories. We entered the Gaza Strip with force. We eliminated tens of thousands of terrorists. We eliminated Mohammed Daif, Ismail Haniyeh, Yahya Sinwar, and Mohammed Sinwar." And notably, Sinwar seems to have actually been killed almost 2 weeks ago, but the group refused to acknowledge his death at the time. Right, and that is, it's not like the Israeli government was rushing to release the news. Because for many Israelis, Sinwar's death death is probably a symbolic victory, but for the government, it might be a catch-22. And that because as they continue to assassinate Hamas leadership, it becomes increasingly unclear who is actually leading the group. And that then also makes it harder to negotiate a peace deal, which, speaking of that, there's a ton of confusion about whether a deal is actually on the table right now. Because you had reports coming out over the past few days that Hamas was agreeing to a 60-day truce proposed by American Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, a deal that would also include exchanging 10 of the still living Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners. However, you then had Israel and the U.S. denying the claims that any ceasefire was going to happen, and a U.S. official even said that what Witkoff saw from Hamas was, quote, disappointing and completely unacceptable, which kind of paints the picture that he's not exactly close to making a ceasefire happen. Though then, with that, speaking of deals that kind of involve Hamas, Trump, he's continuing to try and secure some kind of Iran nuclear deal. Though there, Trump's negotiations really haven't seemed to move much, with Iran's foreign minister swearing last week that, I have said it before and I repeat it again, uranium enrichment in Iran will continue with or without an agreement. You know, for the American side, that's a huge red flag because while most negotiations seem to allow some enrichment, there's a push to stop it before it gets to the point where they can make weapons. And that is Netanyahu hasn't helped things because he's out there saying that Israel is going to strike Iranian nuclear facilities without any American involvement. And to be clear, you know, Israel isn't involved in the negotiations directly, but these statements from a U.S. ally in the region, it complicates things. And that's before we even mention that Israel may not be bluffing here. Because while they have definitely bluffed about conducting strikes before, they've also actually carried out enough to make their threats credible. And then, speaking of Israeli strikes, we can't forget about the one that they just carried out against Yemen. Where with those strikes hitting Yemen's Sana'a airport and coming just a few days after the Houthi group launched their own missiles into Israel, with the group also claiming that the strike destroyed the last civilian planes Yemeni Airways operates from that airport. And while it doesn't appear like anyone was on the plane, reportedly it was scheduled to take Muslim pilgrims on the Hajj, which is a pretty big deal for Muslims. So Israeli sources have painted a very different picture, and they claim that the planes are used by the Houthis. And following the attack, you had Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz warning, this is a clear message and a continuation of our policy. Whoever fires at the state of Israel will pay a heavy price. Right? And that, as the strike also means that the Sana'a airport was only back in service for like a week following strikes by the US. And that is, in the background, there's been some debate about how effective targeting the airport actually has been. Because it's mostly used for Yemeni Airways flights and UN planes. But then stepping back a bit, it's also easy to see how Israel views all of this as part of a greater conflict with Iran. With, for example, Netanyahu going out and saying, but as I have said more than once, the Houthis are only the symptom. The main driving force behind them is Iran, which is responsible for the aggression emanating from Yemen. And in the past, he's made similar statements about Hezbollah and Hamas, both of which are funded and armed by Iran. But for now, that's where we are, and we'll talk about this again soon because there's breaking news every day that ends with a Y there. And then I've got even more news for you in just a minute, but you ever step in a puddle so deep that it feels personal, like the sidewalk just betrayed you? Because yeah, that definitely used to be me until I found Vessi, who's also the fantastic sponsor of today's show. Right, Vessi products, they're waterproof without looking like they're waterproof. No bulky rubber, no crunchy plastic vibe, just clean, minimal style that fits any outfit. You know, I've worn my weekender sneakers in sideways rain, surprise sprinkler zones, muddy soccer fields, and my feet still dry, still happy. Like Vessi's weekend sneaker, it legit feels like a Swiss Army knife of footwear. Stylish, versatile, and freakishly functional. You know, it's like someone finally made a shoe for people who want to look good and still have toes when it rains. They're lightweight, they're breathable, and somehow they still manage to feel like your favorite broken-in sneaker right out of the box. They're perfect for travel, errands, or those outdoor events where the weather always turns into chaos the second you show up. And I'm not kidding when I say they've replaced 3 different pairs of shoes in my closet. So if you want to stress less and say yes more, this is your move. Just scan that QR code or go to Vessi.com/PDS to get 15% off your first pair. Discount auto applied at checkout. That's Vessi.com/PDS. I mean, what are you waiting for? Your feet will thank you. But then, getting back to news we gotta talk about, RFK Jr. is now officially walking back recommendations for the COVID-19 vaccine, with him announcing yesterday that the shot's been removed from the CDC's recommended immunization schedule for healthy children and healthy pregnant women. And he delivered the news alongside the director of the National Institutes of Health and the commissioner for the FDA, with them saying in a video,
last year, the Biden administration urged healthy children to get yet another COVID shot despite the lack of any clinical data to support the repeat booster strategy in children.
That ends today. It's common sense and it's good science.
But one, not everyone in the medical community actually thinks this decision is based on good science. And two, there is primarily a bigger focus and concern around pregnant women. Because yes, the CDC previously recommended that everyone 6 months and older get vaccinated against COVID. But the group also specifically said and really pushed that it is especially important for those who are pregnant. And recently, federal health officials cited pregnancy as a risk factor for developing more severe cases of COVID. And so when taking the shot off the schedule for healthy pregnant women, it clashes with that. Which is why you have the president of the American College of Obstetricians pediatricians and gynecologists releasing a statement now condemning the move, saying, as OBGYNs who treat patients every day, we have seen firsthand how dangerous COVID-19 infection can be during pregnancy and for newborns who depend on maternal antibodies from the vaccine for protection, saying we also understand that despite the change in recommendations from HHS, the science has not changed. It is very clear that COVID-19 infection during pregnancy can be catastrophic and lead to major disability, and it can cause devastating consequences for families. The COVID-19 vaccine is safe during pregnancy, and vaccination can protect our patients and their infants after birth. Right? And that comes as we've already learned that the FDA is planning to limit future booster shots to only those 65 or with high risk conditions. Now, with all this, I think that a lot of people watching, they're not surprised that RFK Jr. is doing this. It feels like, he's been telegraphing this for a while, but still, you had the Washington Post reporting that CDC officials were surprised, though that was because they were not informed of the decision in advance. But then also, some reports claiming that the decision was made without input from independent outside advisors. So you had Dr. Richard Besser, a former acting director of the CDC, condemning the move while speaking to NBC News, saying, one of the things that I relied on as a pediatrician was an assurance that the recommendations that came to me were based on the best available science and evidence and came from the work of the expert advisors to the CDC. This is clearly not coming from that direction, and that's greatly concerning. And as far as one of the big reasons that many are concerned is that essentially this move makes it so that insurance companies no longer will be required to pay for vaccines for these groups. It's that out-of-pocket price tag, it could price people out from getting it. Because, like most things that happen in this country, the people that have the least are affected the most. And specifically regarding pregnant women, the decision is also going to impact the newborn children of those women, because vaccinating pregnant women, it protects their newborns who are too young to get the shots. And this is, you have doctors saying that even though kids tend to not get seriously sick from COVID, it can still happen, especially for really, really young kids. And so with that, you have people like Dr. Sean O'Leary, who chairs the American Academy of Pediatrics Committee on Infectious Diseases, telling NPR, it's really concerning. I think it's going to be confusing not only for parents, but also for public health professionals and medical professionals as well. This takes away choice. And then I guess to just make this situation even more fun, in the backdrop of this news, we have the other news that a new variant is now making headlines. With this variant reportedly surging in China right now, though it's only been detected in a handful of states. And it's a relative of Omicron, and even though it does not appear to be any more severe than previous variants, it is apparently more transmissible. So yeah, fun times, and now you know. But then, finally today, I want to talk about y'all's comments on yesterday's show and some commentary brought to you by BeautifulBastard.com, where we just launched these 3 brand new fantastic tees and hoodies. Right, you've got Bite the Hand that oppresses you, I identify as being a beacon of light in a dark world, and then the one that I'm wearing right now, I'm very normal and cool and chill all the time. Because if you're gonna lie to people, it may as well be with a really awesome t-shirt. And then there's also 2 other secret tees. You'll see them on the homepage if you go click that link in the description. But with that said, diving into y'all's comments, understandably, there was a lot of conversation around the new Harry Potter kids. And as someone that, I watched the movies, but I wouldn't call myself a Potterhead. Like, I didn't read the books, I didn't get, super into it. A lot of the things that a number of y'all brought up, they're not even things that I was thinking about, right? RJ saying Hermione, she gets called Mudblood a lot through the books, and people are already on the girl for her race. I feel terrible for this kid. And then in the replies to that, as well as in completely separate comments, you had a lot of people bringing up Snape. With, for example, Pokemon coordinator Mayor taking the time to write kind of a full dissertation on this, saying my main issue with the casting is 1, Harry immediately distrusts Snape the moment he lays eyes on him, so in the remake that's automatically going to be seen as weird. 2, Snape's backstory consists of him having grown up poor, joining a gang of Yahtzees, so they're already going to be perpetuating certain stereotypes that didn't even need to be there. And 3, when James Potter bullies Severus by hanging him under a tree, come on. Not to mention the way Severus is described in the books makes him unattractive, and that's on purpose to sow the seeds of doubt in Harry. Because Harry, due to his upbringing, has a severe lack of trust in adults. By making Severus black, not only are they adding in stereotypes to black people via Snape's upbringing, they're going to have to redo certain scenes because otherwise, James is going to be seen as nothing but racist. He was a bully, sure, but racist, no. Because he, joined up with the Order to fight the wizards who were racist. So, interesting points, stuff I wouldn't have thought of, though. I will say, I always like to personally reserve judgment until the thing actually comes out, because especially at this point, who knows the things they're going to change or tweak or what they're going to do. But then, understandably, separate from the focus on that story, there were a lot of people talking about what happened with the Liverpool parade. With, for example, Never Knows Best saying, watching the reactions to the car incident switch from, we're being invaded by terrorists and you already know who did it, to, oh, they damaged his car, I would have done the same, and why did you reveal the race of the driver so fast, was very exhausting, but expected. Which, I will say, 1, it was very interesting to watch a lot of people move the goalposts, but also, 2, fun fact, moving goalposts is a great full body workout. Just make sure you lift with your legs. But then kind of one of the last things that kept popping up in the comments were comments around what happened with Macron and his wife. Because while there was a decent amount of back and forth regarding, the face push, was it too much, was it playful, etc. In general, it was just a lot of people feeling uncomfortable about that relationship. With the top comments on this being things like, damn, I had no idea Macron's wife was on that creepy teacher timing, my jaw dropped. Though then others went further, like Blake the Cyborg, who said, regarding the Macron situation, she 100% groomed him and probably is abusive to him in some way, whether it be physical or mental abuse. It is extremely hard to believe that a good and well-meaning teacher would end up dating their student that is 20 plus years younger than them without some sort of manipulation being involved. And while there was support there was also some pushback, like Heldemon, who said, certainly possible, but then also adding, I could see that little face shove done in a playful way and Macron just realizing it would look bad on camera, but who knows? But that, my friends, is the end of today's show. Thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow, because remember, I got a brand new show for you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific.